Hey, I'm Mike Myers, and this is the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, which is geared to support songwriters and producers to gain confidence and turn pro. I bring on industry experts to help you improve and monetize your skills, engage better in the writing process, and build healthy habits to create a sustainable career that you love. Caffeinated, inspirational, conversational. Hey, what's up, friends? Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 77, The Growth Blueprint with Chris Selim of Mixdown. Now, I'm really excited to have Chris on the podcast because he's a relatively new friend. Liz Shaw, who was on the podcast, had this thing where I met Chris and we instantly connected. And not only is he just like a super kind soul, but he is an absolute boss when it comes to his zone of genius, which is mixing. He has a fantastic YouTube channel called Mixdown that is super successful. He has a fantastic course on mixing. And what I love is when someone is not only amazing at their craft, but they're great at explaining it and demystifying it for others. And so him and I would talk constantly. So I'm so glad to have him on this podcast. We get into this also cool area of 6 amazing points on growth. And to me, these are 6 key points that helped Chris constantly evolve in his career that I've noticed. These are 6 key points that pop up a lot in my life and others that are doing the thing that they love. And here's the thing, you may be doing some of these, but if you can add the others to it, that's where you're going to really hit that sweet spot. So yes, we're going to talk about mixing, but we're going to dive into these 6 key points, a growth blueprint, if you will. So here we go. Let's jump into it. Episode number 77, The Growth Blueprint with Chris Selim of Mixdown. If you're going to record, you got to have a great Canadian on the podcast. I think that's too. What I love is because like I've never met a Canadian where I was like, they're pretty shady. It's just like when I met you, I was like, no. It's just like, dude, you're by far the nicest, chillest dude. When we met in kind of like Blammo with Liz, when we had him on the podcast, he invited me, and then I met you, and I was like, Chris is chill. I was like, and we, I think, I picked I talked to you about YouTube for like, wow, because I'm like, I need to start doing this. What do you do? And you have an extremely successful channel that you built from the ground up.
Yeah, literally.
And you're just, wealth of knowledge, but super nice dude. And I mean, come on, when you've got that awesome French Canadian accent, I'm just like, I gotta have it on the podcast. It's great.
Oh, that's funny. Hey, thanks for the invite.
But dude, but you have a tremendously wonderful career that you've built up around the idea of mixing, informing others through the process of mixing, educating, and you do this for a living. And I always love people that build things from the ground up, because it's always intriguing, like, how did you start the process, the system? And I guess everybody has their niche. Did you realize that mixing was like your thing that you really geeked out on?
Yeah. I always, when I was younger, to go back in time and I go back to my younger years, I wanted to be a music producer. That was actually one of my goals. I remember in high school, the teacher was asking me, what do you want to be as you get older, and people were saying, oh, I want to be a fireman, and in the army or, government worker, whatever. I was like, I want to be a music producer. It's like, I remember the teacher's reaction saying, what is that? Choose something else.
Choose something else? What the hell?
Yeah. She literally, told me that. So like, okay. But, that was always at the back of my head. And I was like, okay, I want to make music and, being a producer, I can see myself working on projects and stuff. And then I went to, computer, tech support and stuff like that. And I always been a musician, playing in bands. And at some point, I just decided to make the jump, took a course, just a 1-year intense production course near Montreal. And I already had people waiting for me to help them out with their productions. And this is how I actually started my own business, doing so right away, right out of school, I would say. I was pretty lucky, in a way. And at the same time, I was I knew the right people, I guess. I'm a church guy, so I go to church, and I was part of that church community in Quebec. And there's a huge music community around the Christian music, even on the French side, and this is where I was actually able to get myself known as a music producer and mixer. Back then, and I started with that one artist that was pretty known in that Francophone worship market, if I can call it that, which is very, very small. But that guy was pretty known, and I helped him out with his live album as a first project I worked on, and that led to other artists, and and the rest is history, So I ended up just starting the studio and working that out as a business.
Did you go back to the teacher and just be like, hey, sorry, I'm actually a producer?
I didn't, but I should have.
But I think that's interesting that you said, I imagine myself doing that. Did, if we kind of go to that, did the visualization and just kind of like you making up scenarios, thinking about like what it would be like, is that just something naturally you do? Because I feel that's important. I notice about people that end up doing the thing. They're they go through these visualizations, almost in the affirmation sense of like they're visualizing what would it feel like to produce an album? What would it feel like to be this? Even though they have no idea, they're trying to recreate that experience because they feel like they're moving a little closer towards that.
I do that all the time, to be honest with you. I always visualize things ahead. For myself, it does help me to move forward with things. Just to sit down and visualize on where I see myself in 5 years, or, on like back in the day, when I was visualizing myself being a music producer, it didn't happen overnight, but it was still in the back of my head. And then I ended up doing the work that I was called to do, if I can say.
I love that, because I think that's a consistent theme I've noticed with people, is that they're the ones that are doing the thing that they love. They take that time to visualize like the experience. What is it going to be like? What is it? Because it's a lot of these things that, other jobs are like, oh, here's a book about it. Here's a thing. Mm-hmm. But like the experiences, especially if you're building something from the ground up, there's no handbook or go-to resource of just like, this is how you build something from the ground up. It's like, nope. It's just you. So you have to visualize, because there's a lot of like what some people would see as disappointments that we need to see as the thing we're creating is like, oh, these are our learning moments. These are the things of us gaining knowledge. So I find that super interesting that you were like, I visualized it, because it's almost like that teacher was, and I'm not saying it's that teacher's fault, but like they just couldn't see it.
Oh,
and so
all.
They're like, they can't, I guess that can't happen. But you're like, I don't know. It's still in my head.
Exactly. And that's fine. If they can see it, they can see it. I don't mind, Mm-hmm. But as far as I can see it, that's what's important.
But that's the thing too. The creatives are okay. They're fine. Like, hey, I can see it. And frankly, at the beginning, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
There are people that are not going to get it, but they don't have to.
Exactly. It doesn't matter.
Because because at the end of the day, I have to build it. I'm the one. So it's like, that is, I find that interesting, especially getting out of the gate and, getting that experience, okay, so you went for a year, but then right out of the gate to have these projects, the implementation, did you have some preconceived notions of what you thought it was going to be? And then you got into the thing and you're like, oh, this is what it's like.
I was playing in the band where the lead singer had a home studio. He was working in Cubase. I remember Cubase VST at the time. So I was kind of introduced to the whole production thing at that time. But that was even after I was dreaming on being a producer. I was studying in computers. I remember that, playing with that band, studying in computers and recording on weekends and practicing with the band on weekends, recording in Cubase, recording demos. And he was already working with some artists. And this is actually where I got to know the first artist I ended up working with later on.
That's awesome.
So by creating those connections, I was actually the session drummer at the time for one of his album, and the rest is history. So I was introduced to the kind of recording and production process, and that helped me a lot when I first worked on the first album I produced. So I went to study anyways, for a full year to get all the knowledge, the basic stuff, how to work with a DAW, how to record, and the basic mixing techniques, and all of this. And that helped me to just to starting the business, working the craft of engineering and producing and so on and so forth. So so I learned a lot before getting to study the craft, and of course after, by doing the work. And this is actually where you learn the most.
Yeah. Doing the work is because it's one thing reading something and being like, oh yeah. So that's how, because we did a song critique and somebody asked, did they hit? And what you were describing is, yes, on a mixing standpoint, you kind of you check the boxes, but there's something else. And sometimes it's not that tangible thing where it's like, it's easy as, ticking the boxes. It's like sometimes doing the unconventional thing. And people are like, but that's not how, but it's going to make that song feel a certain way. It's what it needs. So sometimes it's the out of the box thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm going to add to this, like the first project I worked on, because there's a learning process. You get out of school, production school. It's not like the following day that you'll be like an amazing recordist, amazing producer and engineer and mixing engineer. Forget it. It's not going to happen. So the first album I worked on was a live album. I remember that artist. He's still a good friend of mine. And he called me. And he was like, "Oh, I have a project to record a live album." He already had like a few albums behind him, and so he was ready for a live album. Can you produce a live album? So yeah, sure, I can. No problem, man. Hang up the phone. I was like, okay, how the heck am I going to do this? How do we produce and record a live album? So I remember my uncle is a business guy, and I remember him telling me the story on what's very important in business is to, it's like a chess game, you need to have to place the right, how do you call that? The right people at the right place, basically, so you don't need to do everything yourself, but just make sure that the right person, you can hire the right person for the right task. And at that time, for the first album, it was how I was able to produce that album. I was the music arranger, and I oversaw the whole thing. So I was mainly acting as the arranger, and the music producer. So I didn't record it. I was playing the live show.
Okay.
So I hired someone to record the show, someone to mix it also. He ended up being my mentor, my mixing mentor afterwards. So I actually assisted the whole mixing process of that project. We recorded the live event and the following night also, in front of an empty room. So I had a chance to edit. I did all the editing. So that I was able to do. And the rest was done by hiring people better than myself. Because I was new at this, so I had to hire the right people, and it wasn't me at the time. So I took advantage of that to learn a lot,
There are two things that are, well, there's lots of good things, but the first thing was the fact that your friend called up and you said with confidence, "Oh yeah, I can, absolutely, I got this. This is
Exactly.
Totally, absolutely." You said yes because the desire of I need to be doing this, and then you hung up the phone. Then you thought of, okay, how?
Exactly.
So it was just the initial, just
Exactly.
the yes. And I feel too many people do the how, and then they go no. And then so they think about it. But you just it was an unequivocally a yes, you committed and then figured out. But then the next part is, and this is a book that I love, which is, maybe we talked about Who Not How, Dan Sullivan. I love it. What
cool.
You found people to fill that gap.
Yeah.
You didn't worry about oh no, I have to do this. You were like, okay, who can I find that's doing the thing? But you are also learning from them. Who Not How is essentially saying, cool, you found out instead of going how am I going to do this? You were like, who should do this?
Exactly.
You found the who, and you
Exactly.
learned from them too, and then you found a valuable resource. So it's like, that's huge. Saying yes to that first event gave you your mentor, gave you insight to the process. If you had said no to that, that would have been robbing yourself from all these amazing experiences.
For sure. That event got into a chain reaction because the same artist I helped, since that album was, he was very happy with the outcome of the album.
Yeah.
It sold well. So that brought me more clients afterwards. He actually started kind of a mini record label in that market and just brought me more artists to work with. And he was able to finance everything, So I was like, okay, cool.
How many people have said no to things that they should have said yes to?
Probably more than we think.
And they rob themselves of a ton of experiences that could...
Yeah. I think fear is one of our most, the biggest enemy we have to face on a regular basis. Fear of the unknown, fear of jumping up, and trying stuff and risking the risk, the fear of risk.
It's amazing. And maybe this is where the visualization comes in.
Yeah,
because maybe the people that say they visualize, even when they have those moments of, it's not saying that as we grow that the fear doesn't, it's just new levels of fear. I feel like as we grow in music and we get to the things that we want, there's like a whole new thing where we're like, oh shit. We just feel it. But because of the visualization, we have a little bit more of that amped up courage to be like, yes, let's figure it out. But man, I do think about that a lot, that there are people that I encounter, and then when I encounter them a year later and they're still in the same spot, they still haven't said yes yet. And they're waiting for the right moment. And they even say that, I will when the moment's right. And I'm like, you know what? There really is never really a right moment. There's no such thing.
That's the thing. It's the moment will never come. The right moment is never going to present itself. At some point, just need to just jump and see what happens and do the best you can. It is the same when I remember when my wife got pregnant with our first daughter.
Yeah.
There's, especially in early 20s, it's such not the right timing whatsoever, so forget it, But that's, it happens and you work with it and everything that follows is great afterwards, so.
But I think of all as you said it was like a chain reaction. All these experiences that happened that helped shape who you are now and what you've done and the work, and now that how you're helping others, because then, you build this career, but to build something in a social media platform and really dive in, that is, to me, is that's another unknown land.
You know what? It's funny because I never, you brought up the visualizing stuff, at the beginning of our conversation. And I actually never saw it this way. And I'm happy you did, because now it's like everything makes sense now. I can see all the following and everything I went through, through all the years and with the career I have. And it's like, okay, I did a lot of that. And even on starting a YouTube channel, I remember back in 2015, I was looking at creating content online and considering that avenue. And I was actually visualizing myself and already knowing that, okay, if I do that, that's because I want to end up selling courses and helping people out and sharing my knowledge. I've been producing music for years, helping independent artists in my community and in the market I worked in. And now it's time for me to just share my knowledge. Yeah. And remember, back then, the music industry changed. A lot of people were started to self-produce themselves, writing their own music, recording themselves, mixing themselves. So I had to think ahead, So I know that, okay, getting offering only mixing services or recording services, producing services in the area that I was in Quebec probably would not be sustainable on the long term. So I need to think of something else or something I can add to my business to move forward. And sharing my knowledge online was it. So I start to visualize myself, selling courses and helping people out and just growing a YouTube channel. And that's why I was able to make it, because it's hard. It's not easy to start an online platform. There's a lot of time investment. You do a lot of stuff yourself. You know what I'm talking about. You went through the same thing.
Well, it's you think and then you dive in and you're like, oh my Lord, I have no idea. It's just like, but okay, so this is another thing. It's like, I think you're hitting on some freaking key points. You came to a point where you were doing one particular thing and you realized you had to pivot.
Exactly.
There's some people that keep on doing the same thing and go, oh, I guess it doesn't work anymore. It's like, there's just a new way. It's changing, and you need to change with it. And you've got to make this pivot. It's not saying what you're doing isn't relevant. It has to be presented in a new way, in a new context.
Exactly.
There's so many things that I think are very people that are successful, they do the visualization. They have that who, not how. They're learn, but they pivot and they say yes to things. It's like, that is huge, that pivot. And as you said, you dove into it and you realize you stayed with it too, because you had to have that. This is going to take a while. Mm-hmm. This is not going to be like, yay, I got 50,000 subscribers. And it was these 2 videos were viral and I know exactly what it is.
Doesn't work this way, unfortunately. No, it takes a lot of work, and the transition before I was ready to sell my first course. It took me 3 years because I was still mixing and producing and, sound engineering and stuff. And I still do. But I'm way more selective on the projects I work on because I build my own online business, but the transition to be able to be on YouTube full-time, teaching, selling courses, took me 3 years, even more, because even by selling my first course, when it first came out, I was still, doing a lot of work for a sound engineer at churches and recording and producing and, so. But yeah, it takes a long time, and you need to be consistent. You need to add value every time you share something, because the goal is always to help people out. And even if we sell courses, we have products, but the reality is we give away free content more than anything else.
That's what I love about your channel and just you as an individual, because you can tell when someone's like, hey, I got a thing. Yeah. And that's it. They're very detached from it, where it's like, I'll tell you stuff when you buy.
No, exactly.
And it's not like they're so hesitant to give any bit of it's very protective. And man, that just feels, that's not how it works.
It doesn't. Not anymore. Maybe back in the day, but not anymore. You want to be successful, give your secrets away. Produce the best content ever and give it for free. It's funny to say, but that's reality.
It is. It's giving that content out. And there was another thing that you hit as you were kind of in this period of creating. And I feel like I go through this a lot. There are certain points in my life where I can realize that there were transition points where I was doing a lot. There's this pivotal moment in transition where you're doing this full-time thing while you're doing this full-time thing, because to get it to that point, you have to kind of do both. And I've told coaching clients that want to make this transition, there's going to be a period where you're going to be doing both. There's not going to be this happy oh, now you can jump off. The jumping off point is when they're both basically full-time, and now you can make that transition. Mm-hmm. You can't jump off when it's like, I've got 3 things, and now it's like, no, you've got to build it. And it's got to be and you've got to know what it's predictable, self-sustainable. Then you can make that jump. So you may have to juggle
a lot
for a little bit.
Yeah, which is fine. It's part of the process.
But just the fact how you said that, you just said it with kind of oh yeah, it's fine. I felt the same way, where I was like, oh, this is just part of it. Some people are not okay with that. They think that oh, I can't do that. I didn't think I could do that, but I was like, I really want to do this. So I guess this is what I got to do. You just accept it.
Yeah, and I think most people they visualize the end result and they don't enjoy the process.
It's funny, you mentioned they don't love the process. The process is the same at $0. It's the same at $500. It's the same at $1,000. Even if you hit your money marker and you get the results, if you don't like it, man, this sucks, because this is going
to be long. It's going to be a long ride.
But you have to. You have to love creating content. And you have to I love coaching. I love getting into the nitty-gritty of just hearing someone starting out, and they go ugh, this is a problem. And I go, ooh, it's a problem. I'm excited because it's like a puzzle piece.
Yeah, it's
oh, this is a puzzle. Let's sit down. Let's talk about this. There's a solution. I love podcasting because what we're talking about now, I'm excited because I'm ooh, you're talking about this point and this point. I'm seeing all these little patterns of people that do well, and I'm ooh, you're just hitting on this again. because it's so important, but I just get excited. It's fun.
It is. It is. And no, you need to enjoy the process.
It is. It has to be that you have to enjoy the process, because if you don't, it's hell. Go find something else then this is going to be the worst thing. Because when you grow, when you get somewhere, like let's say you get to your end, like your ideal end game, you're going to realize that it's not going to end. You're going to visualize something else. So you're always going to be in process of something. So you better enjoy the process, because that's the ride, It's the end. There's no end goal. There's no mountaintop. No. Everybody thinks music is a mountaintop, but it's just a residual slow climb to the next. I always like to think it's like you get to another level and you acclimate to the base camp of wherever that is, because it's lower oxygen level. And so that means the next climb is going to be even harder. So you got to get used to it, and then you keep on going. Mm-hmm. But yeah, even if you get let's say your goal is I want to produce an album for clients, and let's say you hate producing and you hate the process. Yeah, I produced it for them, which then attracts more clients, and you go, ugh, I hate working with clients. Then you're going to hate it. Of course you will. That's not a good start. But it's interesting, because if we filter back to how you started, mm-hmm. if you had said, your teacher's right, I should find something else than producing. And then you go I'm going to get into accounting. Yep. I could have. I would have been bad at it, but I could have. Yeah. That was the thing. Now we had Chris the accountant that sits there and goes I don't even work my accounting on my wife does it. She's good at it. It's not me. So imagine if I ended up being an accountant, I would be so bad. Yeah, exactly. But you would have been well, they said that was what I should do. If you listened to the right people, mm-hmm. you listened to eventually your mentor in mixing. You listened to what he did, and you took it, you absorbed it, and then you applied it. But then what's amazing too, people that are great at their craft not only applied it, but then they help others. Then they reach out and they extend and they go let me show you how it's possible. Yeah. And I think that's the other thing I want to get into. I think there's this myth of mixing. People are I'd do anything for a good song, but not that. And it's mm-hmm. mixing is the thing where it's there's so many unknowns. There is. It's not easy. It's an art. Okay. Yeah. It's because there's a technical way to see mixing, but there's also an artistic way to see mixing. And I think it's a good balance of both. And I think the technical part is what scares people a lot when producing music. And you think about EQ, compression, saturation, and all those techniques, the sidechain compression and so on. It's okay, whoa. Let's put on the brakes and go back to the beginning. What is mixing? It's the balance of a bunch of tracks together, so it makes sense when you listen to it, and it feels good. Technically speaking, but also artistically speaking. I love how you painted it as artistic. Yeah, the idea of not only is it the balancing of everything, but it has to feel good. Because I always say that the song has to feel like it's moving in the right, and feel is such a people are what does that mean? What, try to find some tangible, what does it mean to feel good? You listen to it and everything's in its place, but it flows well. Exactly. In the transitions between sections, nothing sticks out of oh, what is that? It's just oh, there we go. It works. And if you focus too much on the technical side and you balance that technically perfect, maybe on the artistic side or the feel side, it's going to sound boring. Sometimes on perfect technical balance is going to add more on the artistic side of the mix, and it will be better for the song. It's you can check all the technical boxes. They said, I watched, I read this book and it said, have it at this dB, and I did. Yeah, but was it right for that vocal? Exactly. Was it right for their style? Yeah, for the context of the tracks that I'm mixing. Oh, that's why there's a lot of I heard newbies new to mixing that have a bunch of talent because they listen to music a lot and they know what good arrangement sounds like, good mixes sound like, and when they end up starting to mix their own music or for others, they might not have all the technical knowledge,
but they can produce amazing mixes just because they focus on how the music feels like and how it should sound like on an artistic side more than, all the technical stuff that I try and, or aiming to be technically perfect, So it's always a balance of both. It's a bit like music theory and writing music.
Yeah.
So you can write a bunch of music without knowing the theory behind it. It doesn't mean that's the way to go, but I'm just saying that it doesn't mean that not having the knowledge of music theory is I'm not saying that music theory is useless at all. I think that's going to be a very good addition to even write better music or give you better tools to work that out. But
it's a good pairing. And I think it's not really leaning heavily on one of the other. Like if we lean too theory-wise, I can hear when someone's written something where it's like, well, it's in the key, so this works. And I'm like, yeah, it does, but should it? It's just you can go out of the box. You can do some things that are a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think when you have the marriage between the technical and the artistic, that's where you end up getting things that you're like, oh, this is great. And you have a very good way of describing things that are, you give the technical reason, but it's in a way that's like, oh, that makes sense. And not
Yeah. But, sometimes I get questioned and it's hard to answer. Okay, well, what kind of EQ should I put on my vocal? Well, what can you share your vocal change? Yeah, but I can, but I think it's going to be useless for you because, that is a vocal chain that goes with the song I'm mixing. It's in relation to the tracks I'm mixing. So it's not like a go-to vocal chain. And I think, I do work with a mix template. I love working. I actually have a free training on how to build a perfect mix template. And people, they get surprised that because I do give a Cubase version of my mix template, but it doesn't have any plugins in it. Because that's not the point. All the plugins that I have on my mix template, because I have on my own template, all of my plugins are in the session. Everything is bypassed because I don't even know if I'm going to use them. If I'm going to need to use all of them. I have my go-to plugins, but they are bypassed. And when I activate one of them, I make sure it works. Then I can tweak them up,
That totally makes sense because, it's when someone asks me, well, what voicing chord are you using right there on guitar? And I'm like, well, here it is. Cool, I want to use that for my song. Why are you right? It's almost like they're asking you, please give me this chocolate frosting. And you're like, listen. What you have right there might be a lasagna. And so having this on your lasagna may totally not work. And they're like,
exactly.
No. Because it's hard to describe that.
Love the analogy.
I go with food analogies a lot. But I get that where it's like they want to know specific. And you're like, what you're asking for, I can tell you, but it may not suit your thing. What I find valuable is that you give insight to the process. And it's probably the same when you watch your mentor. When I would watch someone build out a track, it would be interesting. My tracks would be different, but it was just to see their flow and to see it in practice and be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to try that. There are things I try and I'm like, ugh, I don't like that. Or it's like, it's not now, but there may be a time where I might use that. But it's giving me insight to that. Their flow wasn't always perfect, but it was like but it was the same thing. They had a template, but things not activated because they would test it out. Oh, not used. I had my mastermind group here this weekend in Nashville and we were building out songs and I had my template loaded, but things weren't activated. And I was like, oh, we might use this. Oh, we're not going to use this. And I would delete it. I'm like, we don't need that. And he'd be like, but you used it. I'm like, yeah, but not for this.
It doesn't work,
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's it's an artistic moment of yeah, that's not going to work for this.
Oh yeah, same thing. And I use the template mainly to, first of all, my plugins are in the background, so I can easily activate them, so I don't need to reload them every time. So that's one thing, and also all the routing, which I usually use the same type of routing on all mixes. The way I route all of my drums to the drum bus, and that goes to the mix bus, and so on. So this is all the kind of work that I don't need to do every time I start mixing a song because it's part of the template, and this is not going to change.
I love all of that because then you're hitting on another. So there's so many. So we got visualization. So I guess let's see if I can put this in order. So number one, it was the visualization. Number two was the automatic of jumping in and saying yes just being willing to say yes. Then the other one, then you have a who, not how. You've got your mentors. Then you've got on top of this, then there was another one. There was another good one. I'll go back. I'm going to boil it down to this because there's so much. But then this one, you had a time saver. You built a template over time because your zone, another book is good is The Big Leap, and Gay Hendricks talks about the zone of genius. Your zone of genius of mixing, you have this time saver, which is this template, because you realize your spot of creation and artistic creation of mixing, how can you be the most efficient? Having that template allows you to then jump in and start. I remember when I sent a song off once to a mixer, Mark McCluskey, and he was mixing something later on for a friend's live band. When I saw him, I was like, "Hi, I sent you this thing." I think I was like, I wanted to know. I crossed checked the boxes off, and he was like, "Oh yeah," and he was like, "It was great," and he was like, "Dude, I just have a template," and I was like, It was just like, what's that? It was just like, because I was still very new and I was so self-conscious. And he was like, yeah, I threw things on. So I know, and he was like, I do it because when a band sends me stuff, I throw it in.
Yeah.
And if it works, I send it off to them. If they say yes, I've saved myself a buttload of time.
Of course.
If they come back with changes, cool. Now it's time to get in and make those changes. And I was like, I thought of all the hours I spent there just looming over and create. And I was like,
but the same goes when writing music and recording.
Yeah.
It's going to be way easier. You probably have your own, all of your synths that you work with a lot loaded into your recording and production templates, which makes it way easier. You have a musical idea, you open the session, open your template, and you're ready to go with all the synths loaded, which are all bypassed to begin with, but you use the ones that you need for this type of song. The drum tracks, the virtual drums are already loaded, so you don't need to look for sounds and the sounds that you work with also. I'm pretty sure you do so for your guitar rigs and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
When I had my group here this weekend, I had those templates loaded. They were ready, and I'm like, cool, let's start recording. So there was no lull, but I feel, how do you get to that? So it's how we get to that point. Your mixing template, the thing that works for you, that is built on you saying yes to things and building it out and understanding it. But then your template's probably changed over time.
It does always change. Year after year, I change stuff, for sure.
You make that pivot. You make that small, and it's these little changes where someone may be like, oh, what'd you change? And you're like, oh, this. And they're like, how does that make a big difference? You're like, yeah, because you've now used it and you made those. That's gigantic.
It's always evolving. It's always evolving. It's like music. Music evolves too. You don't write music the same way, the way you did 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Well, you shouldn't. Some people do, and sometimes you may have to, and that's okay.
Sometimes we may have to, yeah. But you do upgrade yourself, if I can say that, or evolve in some ways.
It is. We have to upgrade. It's like when we get an alert on our computer, and it's like, I have to upgrade software. What happens if you don't? Well, then you're just going to...
You're going to stay at the same point, I guess. Same level, same point, and...
then you wonder, nothing's happening. It's like, you didn't pivot with it. You didn't change with it. It's not that you can't do it. You're just kind of locked into the same system. I don't want my process to look the same next year or 2 years. It probably should be different.
Probably.
And I guess that's a question too. You've built your channel.
Yes.
That probably had to be a series of pivots. I mean, looking at thumbnails, headlines, I know those are I'm still new diving into this. And you and I have talked, and I drag my heels. I'll be honest. I'm still, since we've talked, have I filmed a damn thing? Absolutely not. Nothing. I am still I am still at the rest stop thinking about where should I start? And you told me specifically, you have to start doing it. I was like,
that's
interesting.
The thing. Yeah, that's the most important thing, is to start. We can dream, we can visualize, we can think of, okay, I'm going to love the process. Okay, yeah, but you need to freaking start. Starting up is the most important thing. The rest will follow. Then you'll be able to enjoy the process. Then you'll be able to accomplish the visualization you had from the start,
All right. So, so today's date. So this is coming out next week. So, or when people are listening, as this is coming out, I'll make because accountability, that's probably another thing. We've been, I will say by next week, I will have one video out next week.
There you go.
So people will go, and if they find out, then they'll be like, man, Mike's not good at keeping his word. So it's like accountable. So I might as well just put it out there, or I'll just get Chris, who edits this podcast, to edit it out. I'll be like, last minute, I'll be like, just edit that out.
Remove that. Yeah,
remove that accountability. But it's interesting what you're saying. It's like, I think of that because you can go to people that are, doing it. And when we sat down, you gave so many helpful things, but that was the key thing. You were like, you have to start doing it. And I think too, part of me is like, it's that scary, like, what if there's no point to it? What if it doesn't work? And I'm visualizing all the negative things to it. I'm not sitting here going like, well, what if it ends up being working well? What if it ends up being something that's beneficial? What if it ends up being, I'm going to all the things like, what if this is, what if this, what if this, what if this is just a big waste of time? What if this is, and it's like, do you realize that you're doing the reverse? It's like all the things that you talk about, like we were talking about, like I do with other things, like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm visualizing what it'll be. I'm doing all the terrible, like the channel burns and it catches fire and people are just like, this is the worst thing ever. What's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, that's the thing, But again, I do understand why at some point we get busy with business, with work, and it can be a challenge to start something new or to accomplish something new that we visualize and that we want to go towards, So like yourself making a video or making videos on a regular basis on the YouTube channel, or on myself to write more of my own music and maybe aim for music placement and stuff. This is something I actually visualize myself doing, but I didn't start doing yet. So I'm kind of in the same boat as you are, on a different.
Oh, it's funny when people get into music licensing, they're like, is it going to be right away? And I'm like, no.
Again, there's still a process in that whole
like,
thing.
You got to be okay with like 3 years of literally nothing happening.
Exactly.
And you're just building up, and they're like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, this is.
But what are you going to say? You're going to say, start with one song.
Exactly. I don't know. And you told me you were like, this is kind of like you got to start with one video. And I was like, oh. And it was like, but it was that moment of being seen when someone calls you out to just be like, hey, you're already doing it, but like, it's kind of like this. So stop making it and just do it. But because it's the same thing. If I start, I remember, I had a business coach who was like, you should start a podcast. I was like, oh, so many people have podcasts. I'm so sick of podcasts. It's just like, I'm going to be another dude that's going to be like, listen to my podcast. But here we are. It's like, you're going to be episode number 77.
This has
been great. This has
Congrats,
been
man.
It's so fun. I love this.
But it's a great podcast. Honestly, I'm not saying that because I'm on it right now, but I love your energy, love the vibe that you have on your podcast. And it's fun to listen to, I have to say.
And it's been fun because then people listen, then they move into my world, and then they jump into, classes, coaching. I've met so many. Some of them were even here this weekend. One of them, Celeste, was here, and she was like, "Oh, because I listened to your podcast." And I was like, "That's crazy." So it's like when we think of things like, if we didn't do this, we're robbing ourselves of all these experiences, and we're also robbing others of what we can offer them.
Exactly.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Because we think we don't have anything of value to give.
It's surprising how more people have value to share than most people know of, So people don't realize that they have way more stuff to share than they can realize.
If I didn't do the podcast, then I wouldn't have listened or brought Liz on. Then he wouldn't have invited me to Blamo, which means then I wouldn't have met you.
Exactly.
Maybe in a different scenario. Might have. Maybe. Possibly.
Maybe.
Most likely not.
The chain reaction.
Yeah. So again, it's just that thing. So I think there's so many just key takeaways here of what you have done that I feel are consistent along people that are successful, that you still integrate into your daily life, but it's produced this body of work and this thing that you've built, this career that has different facets, which you create courses. So you've got a mixing course. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, listen, I want to do this, but I need to know where to start.
First, there's a lot of content, free content online. You can check out my YouTube channel. If you lucky enough to work in Cubase. I'm a Cubase fanatic, so I do a lot of videos on Cubase also. That's my main DAW that I've been working with since I started my studio. So it's been like I told you earlier, the first kind of experience I had in the studio was with my bandmate, and he was working with Cubase at the time. So I do a lot of mixing and Cubase tutorials, and also, of course, recording and mixing. So I have a mixing course, which is it's based on Cubase because that's the DAW I work with. But it also, I also share a bunch of mixing techniques. So it's not only related to the DAW itself, so anyone can actually follow that course and just understand the concept of mixing. And I do mix only with stock plugins for this course. So I did that on purpose, not using fancy plugins because I don't want to focus on the tools. I want to focus on the craft of mixing and, the techniques. And so you can work with any tools you want afterwards, as far as you can understand the craft of mixing and, the logic behind it and what to look for when mixing. It's not easy. It's a complex craft, I have to say. There's a lot to think of, but you have to start somewhere.
You have to start. That's the thing too, because it's like, that's where my mind goes to. Once I started to see, and I'd be curious, do you feel this the same when you did the thing and you had those little chain reactions? It kind of solidified, like, I have to remember this. When I get into those moments where I go, I'm not sure, remember, it's probably going to lead to this chain reaction. Yeah. So if somebody's listening, they're like, I don't know, mix it. And it's just like, but what if you said yes to that? And then it ends up like you discover like you really love it. And then you have a friend that goes like, listen, I'll start to pay you. Could you mix it? And then suddenly it creates this, essentially just this thing that's, quote unquote side hustle. But then it becomes, my friend Chris Bradley says, your front hustle, where it's like, it's the thing that you're doing.
You never know what can happen.
You don't know what's going to happen. So it's like, I find like follow the intrigue or the curiosity, because that usually leads to really good things.
Oh, for sure. Life is surrounded by learning stuff. Like for me, that's the way I'm always learning something. I'm always starting to learn something new. I started as music producer, so I studied mixing and, jumped right into it. And I made mistakes and I, learned the hard way. And back then, YouTube wasn't a thing when I started.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough to have a mentor to help me out, to listen to my mixes, to, guide me. Mm-hmm. But I had to learn the hard way anyways. But now, we have access to YouTube. We have access to online content, a lot of help. Yeah, I would say, start mixing. Start if you want to get into this craft, mix your own music and just start doing it. And you're right, you don't know what can follow. I did that with photography. I did that with filming. So that's why I was able to film my own videos on YouTube, because I started to do something that I didn't know about before. I started with music, but that followed by videography, editing videos. And, I remember the first Canon camera I purchased back in 2011. I started just for the heck of it. I'm going to start taking pictures to see how that goes, So I kind of discovered, I kind of like photography. So I don't do that for a living, but funny enough, I actually got a few photography gigs through the years.
That's amazing.
Doing pictures for album covers and stuff like that with people that I was producing in the studio.
Okay.
Go figure.
I think you've hit on 6 key points. I'm trying to remember these now. Let's see if we can go in order. So the first one to me was the visualization. That stuck out. It's just the imagination. The next one was saying yes. But what was interesting was later on, as that experience grew, you realized that that's where you made the pivot to where learning to say no to things. Like you said, I become selective. So I'm like, ooh, I love that. So it starts saying yes, but then the yes will change to a no. Then we've got on top of that the who, not how. You found your mentors. You found those people that were filling in some of those gaps instead of being like, I don't have this. Who should I be learning from? Who should I be connecting with? Then this was the one, pivot. You learn to pivot and change at various moments, various times, and change. You're able to do that. Templates. That means you're always looking for things to save your time.
Yes,
and get back that time. But then the last one that you hit, continuing education.
Yeah,
those are 6 things that I'm like, if somebody's listening to this, this is a good, if I can steal template to like literally on building your thing and creating. I don't know, just a life that you it's not saying there's not going to be hardships or things that are going to be tough, but like you love.
Exactly. You know, I try to keep in my schedule time to educate myself, whether it's to get better at mixing, producing, or even learning an instrument. I'm a drummer. That's my main instrument. And the last few years was a bit harder to get on the drum kit, with the move, because I moved from Quebec to Alberta, Canada, across the country. So with everything, it was very hard to just keep going, recording drums and practice my drumming and stuff. And I just got back to it, so I have time now to study drumming a bit more and get better, and so there's always, it's important, I think, for anyone like running a business, being an artist, to just take time, allocate time to learn about stuff.
Dude, like when we're done with this, I'm popping on to there's going to be a webinar where I'm going to watch someone talk about something, and I already know. And it's crazy because I know what's going to happen. I've always been like, I know I'm going to buy your class. I've already said yes. I know what's going to happen, but I know the value I'm going to get from it. So I'm ready to jump in. So I think that's so funny. It's this, we're always continuing that growth because it doesn't end, and we know it's going to lead to new questions, new pivots, new chain reactions. So, dude, I love this, and we're going to give. So, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Cool, I want to get the course," we're going to have a link where you can jump in, you can buy the course, you can automatically just like jump in right now, and you can start applying. Because to me, this is the best person to learn, in terms of what's out there, in terms of mixing courses. It's just like there's some good ones, but it's like I'm like, Chris does it in a way that I'm like, cool. If I were to do a course on mixing, if I had any interest in that, which it's like, it's not that I don't have interest in mixing, but I don't talk about it the way I do about like production and guitar. Like I don't geek out. You geek out, and I love it. That is why I'm like, just jump into the course. Just jump. Just jump.
And I'll even add a special discount for your audience.
Ooh.
What about that?
Damn. So... Dude, we're going to have to do more of this because I feel like if we got 6 really key points from this, man, bound if we do another one, we'll get another 6 or 7 key points.
And, let me, if someone listening wants to start mixing, wants to start to just try to dive into this process, start with a few things. Keep it simple. Start with an easy song, of your own maybe, and just start by just balancing the tracks without adding plugins and stuff. Just go with a rough mix, a rough balance. Add automation right away just to, get a good feel out of the mix you're crafting. Start with that. Balance the vocal in the center, pan your guitars a bit, and even when you record, when you produce your own music, think of the mixing process at the same time. Where you hear that guitar that you're playing, is it going to be the guitar I'm going to pan to the right, or as far as the tone goes, okay, so now I have like a lot of low frequency based instruments or parts. Oh, maybe I should add maybe a voicing that is higher on the guitar, so this is also part of the mix. So it's thinking ahead, that will make your mixing process easier, when you already think of the mix when producing.
So don't start with a 12-piece ska band. That's what you're saying. That's the worst.
That's what I'm saying.
That's the worst thing to start mixing. It's just like, how many what's the horn section? Oh, 7 horns? Okay, no.
Like like in the course, I do have like a full rock production that I start with. It's a more complex, drums, live drums, not programmed, but live drums, bass, guitars, vocals, synths, the whole shebang. But I also have as a kind of a bonus track, bonus part of the course where I mix a very simple singer-songwriter type of song.
That's awesome.
Where a couple of guitars, acoustic guitars, a couple of vocals, like a djembe or something, like percussions. Very simple, straight, like very easy to mix. So actually, when I start the course, I tell people, if you're new to mixing, maybe the first song, because I go through a full mix from A to Z. So I do teach about all the theory and all the technical stuff, but I actually go through the whole mix using only stock plugins. So you can start by just working on that more simple song and just go through it, Multi-tracks are available also, of course. And I think it's a good way to start practicing, to just download tracks and start mixing and see how it goes.
Dude, I love that. So we're going to throw the link in the description. Chris, thanks for being here. This was so good. This was so awesome.
And it was a pleasure, and thanks for the invite, Mike.
I love it.
That was a blast.
Seriously, this was such a good episode, and Chris has a special offer for you. So he is going to give you an exclusive discount on his course right now. So if you are anyone that's wanted to understand mixing more, that it's always confusing, you're jumping from all these, YouTube channels and you're getting these books and you're still confused as hell. Let me tell you right now, you need to jump in and take Chris's class. I've taken a look at it, and to me, this is something that I wish I had at the very beginning. This was a process I had to learn over time, but if I had this, the process would have been a lot quicker. So right now in our description, we are giving you a direct link plus a discount. That's right. Use the code Mike40. That's right. My name, M-I-K-E, and then the numbers 40 to get your discount. So click that link in the description, especially if you are someone that wants to take your mixing to another level. Believe me, Chris is the guy you should be listening to. And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by another great Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.